All right, so I apologize. I am not going to be here today, but I want to go over what exactly you need to do in Python today, and in your Codio assignment. All right, so let's just take a minute and I'm going to go through some information about lists and list programs in Python, and then you will spend the time in class working on your assignment in Codio. You'll definitely be able to finish it in class, so it is due by the end of class. You should not have it for homework. You'll have plenty of time to finish it, and even if you want to, you can probably work ahead a little bit to the next section if you're feeling motivated. All right, so let's just take a minute and talk about data abstraction. So all data abstraction is it provides a separation between the abstract properties and the more concrete details. So basically, in Scratch, this is when remember we did procedures, we did lists. So that allows us to look at the program, we can understand it more easily, and the parts that are more complex and would be repetitive, we put in a list, we put in a procedure, so it makes our program easier to read, okay? And we're basically giving our programs or our data a name without referencing the specific details. So that's like when you call in your procedure, you give your procedure a name, but you're not showing all the details of the procedure every time you call it. So that just allows us to have a program that's easier to develop and maintain. Today we're going to start talking about lists. So they allow us to create a collection of data. They allow multiple items to be treated as a single value. So basically lists are going to be kind of like another variable when you're dealing with stuff in Python. In other languages, they're sometimes referred to as arrays. So you might hear both of those names, either lists or arrays. Okay, so this is going to be really important. Some of the syntax rules for the programming language. Not only is it important for now, but it's going to be important when you go to do programs a little bit later. So if you have questions on this, you can ask, and I might be referencing back to these slides whenever we're working on this. All right, so number one, if you take a look at players, it is very similar to what a variable looks like. So because our list is kind of like we're storing multiple values in a list, which is like a variable. So you have to have the name of the list, and usually you want it to be representative of what you're actually storing in the list. You have your equal sign, and then in a list, you're going to have brackets. Now, what the brackets are, this blank brackets with nothing inside, that means we have a list. We've defined it to be players, but we don't have anything in the list. So if you take a look at the second down here, players equals, and then we have brackets, and then we have all of the people that are in our list. Now notice they're separated by commas, and that since they're strings, they have quotation marks around them. So that's important to make sure that you're including those quotation marks around them. All right, secondly, when we talk about lists, all right, you're gonna have to know this for programs later on. Remember that the commands for I in range 10 just mean repeat this loop 10 times. So anytime you're asked to create a for loop, and I say repeat something a certain amount of times, you're going to say for I in range whatever. Okay, now notice what we're doing here. So for I in range 10, that means we're repeating this loop underneath us 10 times. It says name equals input, so we're storing a variable in a name. We're asking the user for something, what is your name? Now, notice how we're adding stuff to a list. We're calling the players list, so we're calling this blank list up right here. The dot operator is something that you need whenever you are going to change something to a list. So dot append, append is another word for add, and then name. So this is a call the players list, add the name. Well, what name are you going to add? Well, remember here, okay, this is the name that we've requested. It's stored inside that variable. So now we're adding that name to my list. So if we inputted Bob first, Bob would be first on my list. If we inputted Bill second, Bill would be second on my list. Okay, so we're going to do that 10 times. It's going to add 10 names to my list. All right, so how do you use lists in Python? So number one, you need to provide the list a name, just like what we said before, the players. You need to use the assignment operator equal to, so just like a variable, we have to assign it a specific value. You're going to use the square bracket, so that's very important. That is what distinguishes your list from any other normal variable with parentheses. And then in order to separate your values on the list, you're going to use commas, okay? Just remember that strings have to be in quotation marks, so sort of similar to your print statements. Now, a list typically contains one type of data, but in Python, it can contain mixed data types. Now, in Python, when we start counting at a list, if you're starting at your index, the index count starts at 0. Keep in mind that in Scratch and the AP exam pseudocode, the index will actually start at 1. So you kind of want to be careful with that. All right, so these are some common methods that are used on lists. So method is just something how you're changing the list, and you're going to actually do this as part of your program that you're going to work on. You're going to explore what exactly append, index, clear, and remove all do: count, insert, population, reverse, and sort. So in order to use lists, you want to, number one, reference the list you want. So we want the players list. You have to use the dot operator in order to include any of these instructions. So dot append means go to the players list. Now I want to append or add it. Then use the method you want. So maybe you want to clear the list. So it'd be players dot clear, and then it's going to clear the list. You use the method you want to apply with any other parameters you need as part of the syntax. So when it says insert, okay, you might have something that you're actually plugging in there because maybe you're inserting a name or a space or something like that. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to walk through the common list Python methods using the code visualizer. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And then you are going to complete the list assignment. So I'll show you where you're going to do this in 1 second. But I did just want to make sure that I explained to you what happens with methods and lists. Now, methods can change the list without having to save the change back to the original variable. So remember with strings, when you had the word equals banana, it was always going to print lowercase when we did word.upper. In that next line, it would print uppercase, but in order for it to be casted forever in uppercase, we actually had to change the type of variable that it was, or the type that it was. So word.upper. So word would always be uppercase in this list, or sorry, in this thing. Now, with a list, once you change it, it changes forever. So let's just say that we have players Bob, Alice, and Eve, numbers 5, 2, 3, 1, 4. Those are our two lists. Notice how it says players dot append mark. So this means go to the player list, add the name Mark. It's always going to add it to the end. And when it says print players, from now on, Mark is always going to be in that list. So once you do something once to a list, it doesn't change it, okay? Numbers dot sort, that means go to your numbers list, sort it, and then print it. Now, notice how this prints in ascending order. From now on, it is always going to stay in ascending order. Okay, that's not going to change. All right. So once you do something with a list, it stays there. So you're going to work through PB9. Okay, and in PB9, I want you do have to understand how all of these work. So you need to actually click on this. So click here to see a program using the count method. Now, how this works, notice how we have, this is my list right here, fruit equals. Notice how I'm actually assigning a variable here, x equals fruits.count cherry. Now, what exactly does the count mean? So the count method returns the number of elements with a specified value. All right, so let's see what my next step is. Okay, it's defining x equals fruits.count cherry. So x equals is my variable. I'm going to fruits, okay, I'm going to my list, count the number of times you see cherry. Now notice how this just says print x, because I've defined x is my variable, it's storing the count here. So when I hit next, okay, it realizes that there's 2 of them in there and then is going to output 2. All right, so I want you to go through and do this, okay, because you're gonna have to use these in your program. So the index method returns the index of the first element with a specified value. So this is just an example right here. So here's my fruits, okay, apple, banana, cherry. If we scroll over, we just have apple, banana, cherry. Okay, it says x equals fruit dot index cherry. So go to my fruits. Okay, the index returns the index of the first element. So where is it located? Now think to yourself, is this going to be 2 or 3? And then it's going to print x. Okay, so let's check. Oh, remember it prints 2 because even though it's in the 3rd position, our index is 0, 1, and 2. Okay. Okay, so what you're going to do for your assignment is you're going to follow all of these instructions in here. Okay, make sure you're including at least 5 elements in your list. You want to make sure you use all of the instructions that are in here, because if you look at the rubric, okay, you will be getting points for using the append, remove, count, sort, insert, all of your methods here. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know. This is due by the end of class, so this must be completed by the end of class.